Now it is. Hi! Hi, Joy. We're drinking wine. All right. So, first discussion assignment of the quarter. I'm going to turn off.
I'm excited about this.
I know. Okay. We've held off so we can talk about this. I don't have a computer because it's right there. So I'm probably going to be looking at your guys's.
Yeah.
But the first thing we wanted to talk about was the practicum so far and how that's going. Who wants to start? Does anybody want to start us off?
Yeah.
Yeah, go.
Yeah. It went really well. I think my expectation was a little bit different than reality. I'm not really sure what I expected, but I think once you get there for the first time, then you kind of get your feet in place, I guess, to know where your path is going to go. I was excited to meet the kids. I was hesitant about them being middle schoolers. We talked a little bit about this today in class. I think some successes was just getting them more excited towards the end, and they left very, I think they'll come back. Yeah, I think. And that's hard, too, because you never know if they will. It's not that they're in school, but it's an after-school program. So.
I know.
Yeah. Yeah, and behavior, I think, also was something that I didn't anticipate having to deal with. But it just reminds me that it is something that we have to be aware of, and that.
Well, yeah, and they're older kids, and it's just,
Right.
I think that's something you just don't even think about having to manage older kids.
Yeah.
And their language skills were pretty
I was
across the board.
surprised, yeah.
A lot of them are more proficient than I expected. And then we do have an L1 student who speaks very little English, but that's such a learning opportunity for me.
It's really exciting to have him. But yeah, I think I would agree with you on that. Going into the practicum, I was incredibly nervous because middle school is the opposite of the age group that I want to teach. Yeah. I want to teach kindergartners, and whoo boy, I was really nervous. Also because I feel like my middle school experience was like really traumatizing.
Yeah. Just such an awkward time.
It is a very awkward time. And I ended up having a lot of fun with them. Like, I felt like once we got them loosened up and relaxed, and I feel that we had a lot of fun with them, and I'm kind of excited to work with budding adults, I guess you could say. Because they're preteens, and they're kind of developing their own opinions and thoughts and ideas of the world, and so it's exciting to get to work with students who are very individual.
Something I noticed too, is that their education and their perception of education is much different than what it was like when I grew up. And I think seeing the context in which they're learning was huge, because now I can assess, okay, this is where they're coming from. Mind you, I don't know everything about them, but I had more of an understanding, okay, this is much different than what I was raised to know, and that just deepens my cultural understanding.
Yeah, I was really excited to work with middle schoolers because I've done most of my volunteering has been with middle school.
Oh, really? Is middle school something you want to teach?
That's my favorite.
Really? Oh my gosh!
They're glad to have you.
I don't know. I
commend you because I think it's definitely hard, but it's also really exciting.
But I think you guys are both so good, and I don't know. Maybe you guys will like it towards the end.
Yeah.
I feel like you guys are better.
Like, I'm starting to like it.
Like the thing you did towards the end with the discipline thing,
with
like
Daniela.
you didn't back down.
I think we can say names.
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Just like the fact that you didn't back down, I'm still like learning my assertiveness.
Totally.
And you were like on top of
And
that.
you're very engaging with them too. Like the hand motions, even though, it may be kind of fundamental, they loved it. And they were that's what got them excited was
we did this. We should preface this. We did this one. Lorena did this one activity where we did. Oh my God! What
name game.
A name game.
Yeah.
Where
alliteration.
Alliteration name game and Lorena did this amazing thing where she brought in this whole poster board. I feel like we never actually commented on how great that was.
Yeah.
She brought in this poster board, and we already knew all the students' names, so she put the poster board up with first letters of possible alliterations for their names. So it wasn't like A through Z, it was just we had some A's, we had some T's, some E's, like all those things, and it was a great poster board. And the kids just picked from that what they felt like they were, and it was kind of perfect. Like Carolina was like, "Oh yeah, I'm caring," and or Fritzy was like, "I'm friendly," and it worked. It worked really well, and I think it also took away from the possible embarrassment of not quite knowing some vocab words that fit. So that was great, but what I ended up doing was when kids wouldn't remember, like there was one girl who was active in Helika, and I'm just like, I was like acting them out because sometimes they wouldn't remember. And I'm like,
I feel like the more ridiculous we are, the more comfortable they feel to open up. So
and just the fact that we were all kind of laughing at each other.
Oh yeah,
and that helped.
Yeah, I think so. And I think even for Alfonso, who is our L1 student, even though he didn't understand entirely what we were saying or like what we were talking about or even the context, like he still had fun because we were making it fun, I feel like. So I think we work really well together as a team. That's exciting.
Supportive of each other's lessons.
Absolutely.
But that was definitely just like, I think for all of us, such a shock in the attitude. I think the first thing I said to one of our kids was like, "Oh, do you want to grab a snack?" And I think you watched it happen. Like, I was like,
maybe.
"Oh, do you want to grab?" Like it was a girl that was difficult. I forgot her name. Daniela and Fritzy, and I was like, "Oh, you guys should go ahead and grab a snack if you guys are ready." And like they just gave me all kinds of snacks, and I was like, they're like, okay. And I was just like, wow.
This is how we're starting. Okay. Adjusting,
Well, I mean, it's just so hard because we're so used to giving younger students that direction. Even like the snack direction. Like it's just such a natural thing, especially because you work at a preschool. What do you say to kids? Go grab your snack because otherwise they're not going to do it. And I think it's just like it just we can tell how different it is with the age group that we're working with, and like working on the lesson plans now. I'm so used to planning lessons that are just like
explicit.
Easily engaging too, because you're like, we're gonna talk about dinosaurs, and I'm like, okay, well, now I have to think about how do you engage a middle schooler who's currently going through relationship issues and learning about their personality and developing their body and all of these weird things
with
and
language acquisition on top of that,
and the language acquisition that they're getting from social media. Which is one of the things that I was trying to consider is like, what do I think that they probably do in their downtime? The tweeters. I'm not a tweeter. But I think it's a very interesting age group to work with, and I'm actually really excited about it because I think this might be a first and last. Unless I substitute. I know, you never know at the very end, it could be like, never mind kindergartners. This is it.
6th grade.
7th grade. But it's interesting the dynamic amongst the two of them. Sorry, amongst all of them. Because there already are like cliques and social norms. There are 3 girls that are in a clique, and you can tell it's Angelica, Fritzy, and Daniela.
And 2 of them are sisters, right?
I think it was like Daniela and the one next to Angelica. Sisters.
Or is it Fritzy and Angelica?
I don't think it's Fritzy. Maybe
I can't remember. It doesn't matter. We have 2 sisters in our group, and so I think that's an interesting dynamic. And then we have 2 7th graders, and they seem like they're pretty close friends. That's the vibe I got from them. They seem like they're definitely friends.
Well, Perla wasn't on our list.
No, she wasn't.
So
I think she just joined, which is fine by me.
That's interesting because changing rosters might entice motivation. So when kids are together, though we don't want them to be dependent, they're gonna show up and be more engaged when someone they love or are close to is doing.
I think so.
So I can totally see why that would happen.
Well, first Perla was with Abby, and then Abby and her teammate, I forgot who was with her, but they had they had such a big group, and then Joy was there, and she was like, okay, you go with them, and
they were all
with us, and they were like, yes,
yeah, good.
That's good. Well, and I think I personally like Perla and Carolina together because I feel like they are very good influences on each other. That's what I can tell so far.
Yeah.
But the thing that the dynamic, and we talked about this in the car ride home, the dynamic that I think is bizarre that I've noticed, and maybe it's because it's 3 against 2, is that the 6th graders definitely overpower the 7th graders in this situation. Mm-hmm. And then Alfonso is just kind of, he's just kind of trying to keep up with everything, but he doesn't really notice the social dynamics at all, and I don't think he cares.
He's the one boy.
And he's the one boy too, of course, like really.
It's good now that I think about it too, that you sat in between.
I was, when I,
Maybe we should try to do that.
I think I like that. Hard, but. We sat, amongst the students. We were at a round table, and rather than like all of us sitting together, we actually sat. We were pretty perfectly spread out too.
Yeah, and what I like too is that Alfonso was next to me, and Lorena was translating across the table, which involved everybody. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't just you two, together and talking. It was everybody could hear you interacting.
And don't sit next to him.
That's true. I was actually thinking to sit next to him, but now that you point that out.
Right, because we all get to be involved.
I think sometimes sit next to him, but just try and make an effort, because it was really cool because Lorena, which I'm pretty sure Joy knows this already, speaks fluent Spanish, and it was cool to watch her translate for our L1 student, Alfonso. But she was really good about making sure she wasn't singling him out. And I think my favorite moments of you translating were when you didn't actually know some of the words.
Yeah.
Because all of them wanted to help you with the words. Yeah. And that was like an exciting moment for them, because it's like usually they're being taught the English words when now they can teach you the Spanish words.
That's empowering. I'm sure they get excited about that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Having knowledge is empowering.
It is, for sure.
Shall we?
Yes, let's talk about the study. That's our next thing, is what we wrote down what we wanted to talk about, so we go in a pretty good order. So the next thing we wanted to talk about specifically was the study. I don't have my notes because I'm not on my computer. But do you want to start with what you wrote? Because I really liked what you wrote at the end.
I can read that last sentence, but Joy has it, so it's not important. But ultimately, I thought it was super valuable to kind of have that perspective of things that are truth to me are not truth to other cultures, or like just the study about things that are living and non-living, and how I guess I take it in more of a spiritual manner, just because that's something I'm like in tune with. But just perception of the world goes deeper than facts that us as Americans know. And the sentence, what was it that you really liked?
The very last sentence was my favorite of that section. It was go up a little bit. Yeah, it's where are you? Yeah, this one. The first step.
The first step in becoming more culturally competent is by asking intentional questions and by allowing children to continue knowing that their culture, or what their culture has taught them, rather than assuming they're wrong or uneducated. So just really fostering those beliefs and not automatically writing them off as, okay, that's not true, and that's not what we believe here. But because we want our students to develop culturally diverse ideas themselves. So it's not us just adapting to what they believe, but it's them being educated to know that we all think differently too. So then we're putting the power in their hands of, we're passing on this torch of cultural competence and understanding. So it's not just incorporating them into what we know and us into them, but a worldview. And that's pretty much what I drew from that, the studies, and just, I think things that I knew were truth. Like I knew people thought differently about the sun being alive, and my best friend's Native American, and that's something that she honors deeply. But it wasn't something that I really thought of in this perspective of educating and teaching, and that those ideas or those beliefs are valid, and I thought it was pretty cool.
Yeah, my post kind of connected to yours, and I think like what made me realize that, or like understand it more, it said understanding that every cognitive act must be viewed as a response to a specific social and physical circumstance.
Yeah.
And like social and physical things have nothing to do with academics and
totally
cognitive. And so it's like, it just makes me think like it's just the way that students think. It's like because of something social or physical interactions or something like that.
That's so true. Yeah.
I thought the most interesting part of the study was the actual part where they were asking the students questions about animals and whether humans are animals or not, and then the responses that you get from that.
Yeah.
Because I think I remember me as an American being like, oh yeah, I know that humans are animals because science and yada yada yada, but I know that there are lots of indigenous cultures that don't view humans as animals, and I think that that's an important aspect of cultures is making sure we understand the meaning behind their language, and that certain things hold different weight than other things do. What was a great, like the sun, that was a great example that you were bringing up, was the sun to other people is just a star in the sky, and others worship the sun, and it's
even think about the word love. I know other cultures don't say love unless it's true love, but we say I love pizza, you know.
We throw it around
different
all the time.
Than it does in some other cultures when love truly means a deep passionate love for somebody. Yeah, that's interesting. Really.
I think there are a lot of words like that.
Totally. Yeah.
I'm trying to think of some other ones. Well, this goes into academic language and kind of the strategies I was talking about. But I was thinking of all the Spanish words that we have taken and kind of used and skewed, and how confusing that has to be for a Spanish student to come in and be like, that's not what that means. Like,
which one?
Macho. That was one of the ones I was thinking of, because usually macho just means big or something like that. But macho to us is a very different term. Or
what is the direct translation? Is it like
to me? Well, to
Spanish?
me, I don't know the direct translation, but
I looked it up because I was very curious.
Oh, what was it? To me, it's like macho is like a man who is like he has a lot of authority almost.
Yeah.
And like, he's like.
Superior,
he's a manly man.
Yes.
See that.
Kind of with his nose up in the air, kind of like I'm macho, you know.
And that's where the whole thing with like machismo. Have you heard of machismo?
No.
It's like this thing where like, it's like machismo. Mexican men can be machistas, and that's where they like. It's like such a sexist thing.
Okay. Yeah.
Basically, just like I'm a man, so I'm not gonna do laundry.
Right.
There's lots of translations for macho. One of them is just male.
Oh,
that's all it is. And how interesting, if we go back to the funds of knowledge, the gender difference of the word macho, when it really directly translates as like here, if you want to read that sentence, because I'd rather not.
Oh, el león macho se ve diferente a la hembra.
Which means the male lion looks different from the female.
Yeah.
It's literally just means male.
Oh, yeah.
So that's very interesting, because to us it means, I mean, it says down here, it says it could also mean brave.
But does that sentence she just read reference animal species specifically? The word macho attached.
It says it could be biological. It could be meaning brave. It could be meaning. It could be colloquial, which is it means fantastic. That's fantastic. So it's very interesting. Like depending on the what is it called? Not accent. What is it? Oh my gosh.
Context or?
Well, different students have different dialects.
Oh,
thank you. Depending on the student's dialects, macho can mean a very different thing to each student. Because I think this is a dialect thing. Because when they said colloquial, obviously that means obviously that means to me that it is a different term.
And even on a more minute scale, based on relationships or exposure or circumstance that the child has been exposed to with that word. So it's not just on a grand scheme of of culture and say, okay, this group of people believe this. But it's also just the interaction or exposure you have to a word. Like what a word means to me is different from you guys, even though you've been living in the same environment with the same culture as I have. So it goes deeper beyond just like that.
And going back to what you were talking about with love means something different to each of us, because we each have a very different experience with love. And that's just a very small, or maybe I guess that is actually a very broad example of how complex. And how important cultural understanding is.
Yeah. I have a question for you, Lorena. Is there anything that you see translated between like Spanish and English, or even the two cultures, that you think that there's like a disconnect, or there's something that like Americans don't understand about Spanish speaking people, or the other way around that you notice is like not understood?
Okay. I don't know about not understood.
Do you think like stereotypes?
Yeah, or something that you think that like Americans or even Mexicans or Spanish speaking people perceive wrongly about the other culture. And this isn't something you have to answer now, but it's just something that interests me because
there's just one thing that came to mind, and I was like, in Spanish, there's like when I say you, there's two ways to say it. There's the you, and then there's a formal way.
Okay.
That's usted. Like my grandma, or like someone that, or even like in a school setting, you would never say you to a teacher. You would say usted.
Okay. Yeah.
Like you wouldn't say tú, you would say usted. And I think that would be something that would be misinterpreted. Like I feel like American students get very comfortable and close with their teachers, where they're almost like friends.
Right.
And I feel like I think it depends in some cultures. I know that in my experience, my mom was always like, you respect your professors.
Right. Yeah.
So maybe like that could be a tension.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
That is interesting. Well, because and that kind of goes back again to, I think, 431, which has been over a year since we took that. But before Muddy Questions, by the way, which I don't know if we have one yet. We don't have one yet. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay. I thought you were going to
No, I didn't have one yet. I just was saying that was before that happened. But I'm watching you on the camera doing that. Sorry. But we talked about in 431 how you really, and I think this was also in 432 with Jen Green, is how you talk about how important it is to understand the difference in culture also behaviorally.
Yeah.
So like to some, is it Spanish speakers? I think it's Spanish speakers. It's really impolite to raise your hand and impolite to speak out, because again, you respect the speaker.
I know a few cultures, I think, who honor that.
Yeah. And or eye contact, that was another thing. I think that's an Asian culture. Yeah. Oh yeah, you just don't give eye contact to you don't give eye contact to your superior, and I think that's one of those things that just goes into, if you know you have somebody of this culture, like, do your research.
Right.
Like, make sure.
Like last quarter too, I did a presentation on Cambodian language and social things that I read, like touch. Like male to female touch is like frowned upon in any like. Yeah, I think it's just any touch like that. And also touching the head is frowned upon.
Yes. Isn't it because your spirit or something, or energy or something?
It's like the head is your highest part of your body. And like I can totally see myself doing that. Like
touching a kid on the head. You're like, oh, excuse me. Like, that's totally something I've done. And, or like, especially with really young kids, you just it's something you touch them. You want to make sure they're okay. And
and it's also interesting. I think about that too, and that my natural like instinct is to be hyper worried, and I don't want that. It's a balance. I don't want that to inhibit me from developing a relationship with a student, out of fear of disrespecting them. And so I think it also takes over time and getting to know the student and the family and their background. But I also am hesitant because I want the student to understand that I care for them, and we have this relationship of trust, but at the same time honoring the cultural.
Maybe this can be a muddy question. is, would you have the student take the lead in that situation?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And in cultural situations in general,
Mm-hmm.
would you have the student be the one to take the lead, or is the teacher required to be the person who is the leader for all aspects of the class? Because I think we have a natural tendency to believe that it's necessary for us to lead and to guide and everything, but sometimes I feel like it's important to let the student lead, but I don't know if that's necessarily accurate.
And maybe in particular instances over others.
That
is a money question, right?
Or even just thinking about your money question, just it makes me kind of feel like knowing all these things. It makes me kind of feel like it's on me, and it really it is.
Yeah.
On us to take initiative to find out these kinds of things, but also it makes me think that even if you do research and ask parents and stuff, there's gonna be something that you're gonna miss.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Great money question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm curious. Well, and I guess it goes into too. Do we let the parent lead? Like you were just saying.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Well, do we want to move on from here to the strategies for the case study? Who wants to go first? I mean, I can go first. I read about classroom observations, and but that was a really interesting one to read because it had things that I never really thought about as advice, like specifically making sure every observation you make is factual. And I was thinking about that when I was reading it, and I'm like, well, what is factual? And it was talking about making sure there is no form of assumption, no form of you're not sure, but you're just kind of assuming. And I think that I personally have a very natural tendency to just assume something about a child. Like, I feel like a great example might be Daniela. Like, there's a lot of things I could probably assume about her based on what her behavior was like on Monday that really needs to be corrected in me. I really need to make sure that my observations of her are purely factual. My observation right now is that she's really good friends with Fritzy. She enjoys socializing. And those are just pure facts. It has nothing to do with she doesn't like Carolina or Perla, because I don't know that. She probably just doesn't know them. You know, I need to, because there are things that I could assume about her. There are also things I could assume, probably about every single student there I could assume something. And so it was just talking about making sure that all of your observations come from this point, like you stand back and look at your ticker tape, where you go, where does this bias come from, and how can I correct that? That was a really interesting one in it. And then it of course talked about making sure you get your observations in sooner rather than later, because you never know. Just to make sure you understand their learning style and you understand their the cultural aspects of them and all of those things.
Yeah. And we're just seeing a snapshot of a couple hours of these kids.
So, and I think that's almost more important now than ever, that all of our observations, and especially for the case study, are purely factual and making sure that we're not looking or reading into something too much.
And like an action is factual, but the cause of or the purpose for them doing that thing or that action is unknown, and we'll never know. And shoot, I was gonna say something. Oh yeah, that's also like making assumptions about their knowledge and their ability and what their cognitive development is, and that's kind of what I talked about with assessments and the power of having interview assessments or think aloud assessments, so you can evaluate their thought process.
Yeah, they're so great.
Yeah, and that's what my section was about. And just think alouds. And I think there's value in having a child discuss their thought process, because not only does it break down, like when I study for a test or when I'm about to do a lesson, I speak it out loud because I can hear my voice, and it contextualizes what I'm doing so that it makes tangible sense. And I think there's a lot of value in that for kids to practice. And even for future lessons or future expectations that are going to be put on them throughout school. But it's way more comfortable. And I can just remember times taking tests and I was like, this does not demonstrate my knowledge.
No.
At all.
Absolutely. I think
so.
A great example of that is like in Woodring, I'm so glad we never have tests in Woodring.
I know.
Because
awesome.
I think there's no way to test exactly what we know. I think the best way to test what we know is to let us just do.
Yeah.
And that's I think that's that's exactly what Woodring is pretty much doing, is letting us do to see what we know.
Yeah. My response was actually kind of similar. Like, C kind of said to talk about effective programs and what they might look like, and so yeah. Well, and then how might that take the experience of your current case study or future students? And I said an effective program provides an ample opportunity for students to learn by gaining skill development and connecting information to what they already know. So I guess like my takeaway from that is like, yeah, what you just said, it's an experience thing and connection, a connecting thing.
And even like you say that, and I'm thinking about background knowledge and how important it is to draw on that, because we want our students to be successful.
Yeah.
And we want them ultimately to feel successful, because the times when I felt so lost and behind and just emotional, even distraught, was when I didn't feel successful. And using what a student knows within the assessment and laying it out so that it's accessible, their knowledge is easily accessible. I don't know, I'm just on a brain tangent, I guess, but
no, I get what you're saying, like,
absolutely.
So that it kind of like flows and almost like mixes with the new information.
Right.
So it's like, oh, I don't know. It's not like you're hitting them with new information where they're all of a sudden, like, it's like scaffolding.
Yes.
Yeah. It is absolutely scaffolding within assessments.
Yeah. And I think about when students aren't successful, I automatically think, okay, what am I doing that's not letting them be successful? Because it's totally, mind you, there's some outside forces with motivation and other things that could be happening in a child's life, but mostly it's my teaching. So using that to, you know, it's our responsibility to make sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay. I might have another money question already.
Ooh, on fire.
It has to do with background knowledge, because I personally am still confused about background knowledge and how that works, I guess, because it's been so, I feel like everything we read about background knowledge defines it differently. And I mean, it's literally the word background knowledge is I'm probably reading into it too much, but
that's such a good point. That's so true.
And every kid has such diverse background knowledge. It's like, how do you assess?
Not only that, but like, are we saying if a kid knows a lot about baseball that we test about? That's the thing that I'm confused about. It's like, do we go that far as to like, we're just going to have you learn exactly what you know now? Because then I feel like they're never going to learn anything else.
Okay. This attaches to one of my other responses and about contextualizing assessments. So,
is this a muddy question though? Hang on. Is it or not?
I mean,
I think it's worthy of a muddy question.
I'm really
background
confused.
knowledge, question mark?
Yeah, I'm just, I think that background knowledge is not clear to me. I don't understand
or I guess
how to use it, how it applies, when is it we're going too far into the background knowledge?
Right.
Like, we're just catering to the student?
Yeah. That's such a good question. Mm-hmm. That's so true, and no one ever brings it up.
I feel like it's all like, yes, build on background knowledge. And I'm like, well, I have a lot of background knowledge on things that no one cares about. So
getting access to that knowledge, like as a teacher, these kids are so complex that the knowledge that they have, like that's something I'm struggling with in my science lessons, is that I'm coming into a classroom of kids I don't know, and their lives, their parents, their families, everything that they know, even what they're covering in class. How do I develop a lesson without being redundant, without teaching them something they already know, and assuming that, you know, I could go in there and say, these kids already know this, but maybe they don't, you know, having that. But about contextualizing the the assessments, So I was thinking about what you were saying about baseball, and it kind of probed the thought that contextualizing them, questions or approach to assessment that connects to something they're familiar with without covering the same content. So, like, let's use baseball for example. Like, the structure of baseball infrastructure, or however it's set up, the systems, using that context to make them feel comfortable in something that they're familiar with to assess on different content areas. So, like, and this might be TPR, this might be reading way too into it, but like the baseball diamond, that's something that's very familiar to them. Using maybe a 4-point model. Okay, well, we're going to start on first base. On first base, let's say you're writing a story. What happens on first base? You know, how do you progress?
It's almost like creating the what's it called? The like road map of the story, but using a baseball diamond instead. Let's hit it home.
Yeah.
Like, how do you? I like that a lot.
Putting it into like a context that they are familiar with, or that they love.
And that they can relate to.
Right. And I think the question also goes on to saying, like, how is this applicable in my life? And how does this assessment, like, math questions, often they're like, okay, I'm never going to have, like, 10 jelly beans in a jar. Like, this is not unrealistic. Okay, maybe we will. But there's unrealistic questions, right?
You have more than that. But.
But it's just like, okay, the kids are always like, why are we doing this? This is
this is dumb.
You know?
Yeah, I think I took a math test yesterday.
How did that go? I didn't ask you that.
I went actually pretty well. I did run out of time though, so we'll see. My hand hurt.
I know.
So bad. Get it all out. Regardless, Kim Markworth, who's the math teacher that I have, is very good about making sure that the questions she asked relate to us as students, as college students. Yeah. And she used. In her question, she actually used our names.
Yeah,
and I know, that's me. And this is going to be really embarrassing, but once I saw that there were some of the students in the class names, I flipped through the entire book because I was like, "Am I in here? Am I one of the special ones? Are people going to be writing questions?"
But think about how much more excited you were to answer the question with your name in it. You know?
And not only that, but I legitimately thought about the student it related to when I was writing the question. I was like, I know exactly who this is.
Right.
And I'm like, I can imagine this. I can imagine this scenario better because I know the student who I'm writing it about.
Right.
Yeah. And even that goes into
and even if like you got to your problem and it had your name and then you're like, I'm gonna kill this
person. It's just the confidence.
Sarah ate so many cupcakes that day. But I think contextualizing, I think that's a really good point, is one of the best ways that we can differentiate and make sure that our students, especially our ELL students, are learning and growing. And so I guess maybe this is part of the muddy question, is using what they know and like and they dislike and their favorite things, and using that to our advantage to make sure that we are increasing their level of learning. So we have students who love soccer. We have students in our group who love Drake.
Yeah.
I don't know how you could use Drake, but like you were talking about, you're doing a musical chair lesson next week. Let's put on a little bit of Drake, because how much more excited are students going to get if they hear a song that you chose to store away in your memory that I know you like this, therefore I'm going to use this later for you.
Yeah. Totally. And I was also thinking, it's kind of a muddy question too, is when you have all these diverse, mind you, every teaching job is going to be different, and you'll have a different number of various languages spoken in your class. But creating lessons that target everybody, but also adhere to the individual needs and knowledges and desires of students, right? Mm-hmm. So accessing or developing a lesson that has everybody engaged while still drawing onto their likes and dislikes. Yeah. You know, because you're going to have like 30 kids, and finding a balance between not, you know, what Woodring calls reinventing the wheel. You know, have you heard that? Like just not having to do 10 different lessons, because you want, and depending on the lesson, I guess, you want them to be cohesive and you want students to work together, but also allowing them the opportunity to be individual and that stuff. So it's a balance act that I need to practice.
For sure.
Yeah. I think about that so much. Sometimes I'm like, what am I going to do?
Differentiate.
Yeah.
It's kind of a scary idea, and I'm kind of excited because I feel like we're getting to practice it this time.
Totally.
And I like that our group is a little bit larger, because this is probably the largest group I've ever had to work with doing stuff like that. Because we have, we're close to 8 students if they all come next time.
Yeah.
And I think that especially differentiating with like Alfonso and making sure that he gets the opportunity to participate and learn as much as the next student, which is why I'll say it for the 100th time, we have a great advantage of having you in our group, because we're already differentiating by being able to speak with him, and like we've said time and time again, you're not trying to speak to him specifically, but by doing that, you are differentiating for him stuff.
Just differentiation. Like, I feel like you can read as many books and as many articles, but I just don't think you'll feel as confident until like you practice it. It's like a total practice.
Yeah.
Which is, again, maybe this can be a muddy question. Why don't we have a behavior management class in Woodring?
Yeah.
Ooh!
We need it.
Seriously.
I feel unprepared for behavior management.
I feel really unprepared.
Or just like,
especially with middle schoolers.
Like a behavior class where we practice our assertive voice.
Right.
Or even just a class like connecting back to like
give me 5 students during recess time that I have to manage, like something like that.
Or even like a class that connects to this first money question, like
how can we let the student
like the cultural thing, like how to do like how to learn that and bring that in.
It's just I the thing that I'm most scared about is not knowing the content that I'll be teaching. It's that I won't be able to teach them because I can't figure out how to manage them. That's the scariest thing to me.
Yeah.
And I have no fear of being able to create a learning target. I have no I mean I have a little bit of fear of differentiating, but like there's very little fears when it comes to the teaching itself. The biggest fear I have, which is like I feel like is the majority of our job, is the behavior management.
I think
it scares me.
It's also when we sign up to be teachers, we accept the fact that there's going to be chaos.
Yeah.
And that that's okay. And things are going to be difficult and kids are going to misbehave. But it's how you like know how to have a plan of attack on the spot. And just like that like you said, it's with practice. Like we can't plan something that's gonna happen. Like that's like why I hate to say the word hate because it's a strong word, but when we script lessons, I hate it because it's not realistic at all.
It's probably not even gonna happen.
No, it's
not realistic. I'm never gonna do that.
Yeah,
it's good practice. Sorry, I just got really snotty. I hate scripting lesson plans.
Let's talk about. We've been going for like 40 minutes. So let's talk about our own experiences with assessment. That was the next one on our list.
Yep,
right?
it was.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
So we've been talking about assessment, but I just want to hear your guys' experiences with standardized testing because I have my stories too. And just the question really was posed about what would make you more comfortable, and using our own personal experience and knowledge to help us with how we would assess our ELL students. So let's hear some anecdotes.
I think one of the biggest examples, and I guess I don't know if this is technically a standardized test, but one of the best examples I have of myself feeling like I'm unsuccessful in a standardized test is with the ACT and the SAT. Mm-hmm. And that is like one of the most important tests that you have to take to get into college, and I feel like it did not test anything that I actually know, because in my ACT, I took the ACT because I knew it was a little bit more literacy and English driven and not as science and math focused, because I know very little about math and science, but I could discuss math and science with you, but if you're going to ask me a question and not let me work it through it like verbally, I'm a very different learner. Exactly. Each of one of us has a very different way of learning, and I feel like the SAT and the ACT do not help with that, and it is one of the most important tests you have to take if you want to continue your education.
Yeah, it's so weird. Like, just hearing you explain that, it just makes me think, like, we still took that, because I also remember taking the ACT and being like, okay, I really don't know anything, but we'll see what happens.
You feel dumb.
But we still got scores that somehow, like, categorized us into being able to get into college.
Right.
But it just, like, makes me think, like, what does that mean? Like,
and what does it do to those kids who have a lot of knowledge?
Like, why does it have to be at a certain standard?
I constantly fought that throughout school. I did terrible on my SAT, like, so bad.
I did the practice SAT, and I did so bad on it that I decided to take the ACT.
Yeah. And I was just scared. I was like, this does not represent who I am or my ability whatsoever. Mm-hmm. Like you, I'm linguistically driven and visually driven, and there was no room for that in the SAT at all. And I was just writing about how rigid they are and how like much pressure I felt walking into those things. Like, all the people around me are so much more intelligent than I am.
I know.
And I left feeling like I did bad, and like this emotional, like, I suck.
Yes.
feeling like I suck.
Yeah.
And you should leave a test feeling prepared and confident and
like you know what you know is valuable. Yes. Because I think that's the biggest issue with standardized tests is it's like the knowledge that you do have, and all of us have knowledge. It just is how do we tap into that knowledge? It makes it feel invaluable. And I remember walking out of the ACT and my mom picking me up, and she's being like, how did it go? And I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah. I know.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm much smarter than that test, though. Let me tell you that. Like,
and even just on smaller tests in class, it was funny because I was always the bottom of the top. Like, I took AP classes, but I was always, like, too good, or I was smart enough to get into them, but not smart enough to be, like, up there. And so I was surrounded by these people who constantly compared tests. What'd you get? And me, I'm like, can you stop? And then when you say, I don't wish to share that with you, they're like, oh, you must have done that, huh? Because if you're proud of your work, you're like, I got an A, you know.
Look at everybody.
Yeah.
It's like,
And, oh, man, I just remember feeling so terrible about that. But I was writing about how cool it would be if it was, like, a chill room, nice lighting, right? A snack, a plate of cookies next to your side.
Goldfish.
A friend to talk, like I said, about speaking my ideas helps me contextualize my mind. Talking out a test, your friend writing it for you, just like it's a conversation.
What about even like manipulatives and like getting to use things, having books, getting to use the internet? Because that's one thing that always bothers me too. Is like you really think I'm gonna take this test and like I'm not going to look up the answer later? Yeah. Like, you really think Google's not a thing now? Like, I use Google for everything.
Yeah. And adapting our lessons to know that knowledge goes beyond looking things up, but knowing that that's constantly accessible to our students.
Yeah.
So using it as a resource, but teaching them
how to properly
use it to where they're still retaining information.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a tough balance.
It is. Yeah. I think it's unrealistic to think that. I talked to Casey a lot about this. We talk about, because he loves history, as you have already seen, and we talk a lot about that he doesn't think the importance of history is the dates, because even though that's what they make you memorize for any of the tests or anything, is you got to know the dates, you got to know the key players, like all this. But his is, how did that moment in history affect us now, and how does that relate to what is happening today? And that is so much more important than knowing the specifics. Or like in math right now, it is so much more about understanding the whole concept of like the math equation and why, or not even why, like how it's used and how, like, the intricate details of it, not just a memorization of the formula. And it goes into everything. It's not this memorization, and the memorization is what takes away from the learning.
I think about Bryant. He's had 15 concussions, and after all of that, he's supposed to have Parkinson's and all this like crazy stuff. But his memory is better now than it ever was, like ever. His memory about things from his past is phenomenal. But he was kicked out of school. He dropped out of Western, and he can't take a test to save his life. But that says nothing about what he knows.
He did a TED Talk for crying out loud. So,
but just in our conversation and our dialogue, his knowledge makes those connections and sees the bigger picture. Because he's set that standardized expectation aside and said, F that, you know. And just the idea that the most successful and thoughtful people are questioners. They question things. They seek answers. And that's what it's about. It's not about knowing.
Yeah, and that's what we should strive for our students, is for them to be people who question the world. And I think that is just to be a citizen in general and to be a successful human, you should be questioning things around you. You should never just like be accept with the norm. And you should never just have to just go along with the flow. You should be questioning, and you should be wondering, and you should be curious. That was a really good point. I really appreciated that.
Yeah, I think so too. And I need more of that. Totally. Had a really intellectual thought, and it disappeared.
Dang it, red wine.
We're all over it, promise.
8 more minutes. I guess like.
Do we want to? We don't have to fill up
there's
this
a timer.
period of time,
I'm just thinking because we need one more.
Oh, we do?
Oh.
I mean, I was kind of joking. Okay. I guess that's kind of a joke, but really it is a muddy question. Why don't we have behavioral management classes? It just. I know this doesn't really have anything to do with exactly what we're learning about.
I think it does.
It's true, especially with ELL students, is how do you manage the behavior of a student that you cannot speak with? That should be part of the, we'll say, go back to 53 and a continuation of this muddy question is, how do you manage a student who you cannot speak the language of?
Behaviorally.
Oh, yeah.
And something that I am working on breaking down is the difference between language difficulties, behavior, and special ed, special needs. Because I think they can often be mixed together. And like we've been taught and been told multiple times that a lot of ELLs are categorized as special needs children when they don't need it. But at what point, and do you say, okay, this is something that needs to be further?
One of my,
No, go ahead. You go ahead.
One of my teachers, she was kind of telling us about that, and she said to like universal design of learning or something.
Okay.
And it was just like to plan up front, plan your class up front for that kind of differentiation, like special needs and ELL, and we did some activities in the class, and she would always connect it to like any activity that is designed for a special needs student will always benefit a general ed student.
Right. Mm-hmm. That's true.
Like any additional support is always going to benefit.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
Yeah. I was gonna say, I think that ELL students are so commonly mislabeled as special education, which is kind of what I'm wondering about. We have one student in our class who has been labeled as being special education, and I'm wondering if it has to do with prior language.
It might. I don't know.
I don't know either. Well, we're going to delve into that because it's going to be one of our case study students.
Yeah, but that also says a lot about what we talked about perception of students, about labeling them, about assumptions, because we don't know.
We don't.
Yeah, and we're going to run into those situations a lot.
I appreciate that it's it's much more directed nowadays with labeling English language learners and making sure that you know a lot more about the students before you label them as special education. Whereas before, I think, like, if you asked 10 years ago, I'm pretty sure, like, most ELL students were labeled as special needs, special education students. Yeah, because it's like, there was no communication, so I can't imagine what it was like 10 years ago for an English language learner when they were technically called ESL, which I think is almost now considering that language, English as a second language versus English language learners.
Right.
Like how different. One, how different it is and how you don't even think about it. But when you're saying English as a second language, it's like looking down on you and saying, it's almost like looking down on you and like, this is your second language, whereas you're striving to learn English. So.
Right, it's the perspective of looking up rather than looking down.
Or even just also thinking about that and the thing that they're doing in Mount Vernon and how she said that this program is like new, it's their second year doing it, and it's where she goes in and co-teaches to kind of show.
I love that.
Yeah, to show teachers how to do it, and I just think that's so great.
Because it is one of those things where we read in the PSYOP book for Joy Nyberg's class that it said when you have a English language learner in your general education class, and I'm so glad that we're getting to be prepared for this, is that you suddenly have two jobs. One job is to teach the content, and the second job is to teach the language. Like that. If you had all English-speaking students, it would just be teaching content. But now you have that second job, and I feel like so lucky that we're getting to be prepared for that. I don't know if we're all going to become general ed teachers, but it's exciting to be prepared for that because it helps me realize how important it is to make sure they understand.
And even adding on to that, to not have them be pulled out and singled out every time you had an experience where you saw that and you had to sit out in the hallway and
my science class.
Why couldn't she just do it with a small group and attention?
Did I tell you that story?
No, I don't know if you did.
So I'm doing a science practicum and it's 490.
So you did tell. You said that you talked about this in class.
And this little boy was sent out in the hall to work on an activity because he didn't understand it, and so he was sitting there with nothing on his paper, and his teacher asked one of the other practicum teachers, to take him out in the hall and work with him one-on-one. Well, now he's getting up feeling embarrassed and didn't want to do it anyway because now he's having to do extra work and is isolated. And I just saw it and was like,
it's exactly what we're not supposed to do. And
I
love that.
Buzzer went off.
Oh my gosh. And I love that now it is so driven to keep them in the classroom and to not separate them. And I can't remember it was Jen Green when she taught us a lesson in Swedish, how she said how important it was to let the students who do share a common language use that common language together, because it is a sense of cohesion, is that the right word, or just like feeling like you belong, and that's like a sense of belonging, and then also belonging to the whole classroom as a community.
Community is huge. Very important.
Yeah. Is there anything else we want to add to this, or is this where we want to wrap up?
I think we should wrap up. We've got our 3 money questions.
We've got our 3 money questions.
Good discussion. Should we cheers to
Cheers to Joy. Joy, you have a good night. Yeah, we'll see you soon. How do I press stop? Oh no.
Stop.
Stop. Bye.